Few more now.
All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Steve Mahoney. I'm a mentor with the Greater Hartford chapter of SCORE. I'm joined by John Sundean, who is our chapter chair. We're going to take you through what we hope will be a very informative set of topics around starting your own business and some important information and tips to get you started. We're starting to have a few more folks join here. We've got a lot of content to go through today. I think we'll probably jump right in to the content, but we do want to have this be an engaging conversation. So if you have questions or comments along the way, please feel free to chime in, or you can put a question in the chat box. We'll keep an eye on that. And also, if you could just keep your microphones on mute, it looks like everybody is right now, just to help us prevent any background noise. We are recording this session, and you'll get a copy of this recording afterwards with more of the content that you could revisit if you'd like. So John is going to cover the first half of our presentation, including an overview of SCORE, and then I will pick it up for the second half. And as I said, thanks again for joining us. And if you have any questions or comments along the way, please feel free to jump in. John, I'll turn it over to you.
Sounds great. Thank you, Steve. Let me quickly introduce myself. My background is in management consulting. I spent most of my career with a firm called Accenture, and we work mostly with large corporate clients on technology-related stuff. And since then, I've done quite a few things, including work with startups, and I have been a SCORE mentor for 4 years. And at SCORE, I have worked with lots and lots of clients and still am. We would like to do intros for everybody, but we find that it really makes these sessions go long. So we're going to skip that. But if you have questions as we go, you can use the chat below. If you have comments, use the chat, and then, turn on your mic and ask your question. And I'm sure we'll have time for everything we want to do. Can everybody see this PowerPoint that I've got here? Of course, everybody's muted. Steve, you can see it, right?
Yes, we are good.
Okay.
I see some nodding heads. So
excellent. So about SCORE, really quickly, I'm not going to use the words exactly that are on here, but SCORE has been around for over 50 years. We're kind of a well-kept secret. We have over 10,000 volunteers nationwide who serve as mentors to small business owners. And it started with a simple idea, which was recruit retired business executives and ask them to be mentors to startups and small businesses. And that's how the idea started. Today, we're not all retired. Many of us are. We have more time and experience than we would otherwise. But we have a lot of folks who are very early in their careers and they're subject matter experts for us and may have more limited time, but they do a lot of mentoring. We provide free mentoring. We provide workshops, webinars like this, and we have a website that is full of resources for business owners. So if you haven't checked it out, I'd suggest you do that, score.org. Lots of stuff there for you. And as noted here, everybody signs a code of ethics. All of our volunteers sign a code of ethics annually that prohibits any of us from doing anything that would be financially advantageous for us as opposed to our clients. It's all about the clients and what we do as volunteers. So we're going to go through a few things today, one of which is there are some misconceptions that some people have before they start a business. I can tell some of you are already in business, so you've probably gotten over those misconceptions if you had them. We'll talk a little bit about doing a self-assessment if you're on the cusp of starting a business and deciding, is this really the right thing to do? If you're already in, you're committed. We'll talk about how to define your concept a little bit more to shape your business idea, turn it into a viable business model, how to test it, and then how to understand the environment that you're getting into in terms of the business environment, legal, insurance, expert advice, and sources of capital. Steve will talk about financials. He's got wonderful background for that, and business and marketing plans and other tools and resources. So we're really going to cover a lot of ground. This is pretty much the material we do in some multi-workshop sessions that we do, but it's kind of a fast blast for looking at things. So here are some statements that people often hear. Being your own boss is risk-free. You have to get it right every time. Successful entrepreneurs do it all by themselves. It's easy to get financing for a great idea. After a year, you can relax and enjoy the profits, and you will have more freedom, control, and work-life balance. Now, I don't know how many of you think these are true statements, but when we've done this in the past and kind of asked the group on each one, most people had their eyes wide open and said, well, these don't look quite right to me. And in fact, I guess we took out the stuff with the answers, but the point is that the successful business owners recognize when they're getting started, typically, that what they're getting into has more risk than working for somebody else, but it also does give them the opportunity to be captain of their own ship. And that's typically the personality that finds entrepreneurship most rewarding. There are people who would rather not be working for somebody else. They'd rather be making the decisions. Not everybody's like that. Right? Not everybody wants to say, what happens today is my doing, and I have to define that and shape it. So I think going into it, if you're on the cusp with your eyes wide open as to what's ahead, will be very helpful. So your role as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, you're going to have lots and lots of responsibilities. Some are core to your business. And what do those include? Well, those include the things you need to do to find your customers and clients. So you need to design your product. You need to ensure that you're providing quality. You need to provide sales and service. And you need to hire the right talent around you. And you need to manage your money. But some things are not core. So recognizing which are which can really help you manage your time more effectively. The things that are not core still have to get done, but you might be able to hire or contract with others to do that more successfully than doing it yourself, including billing, accounting, the legal work, even deliveries and purchasing. So think of core versus non-core, and think of core as the stuff that is central to delivering your product or service. And one would hope, if you're starting a business, that you have real expertise in whatever is core to your business, and that is going to be your strength going forward, and that you will be most successful if you are able to focus your energies on those things that are truly core to your business. So the rest of the material is kind of organized in tips, things that you want to do when you're getting started. And the first one is really do a thorough assessment of yourself and decide, is owning a business right for you? Some of you, like I said, or I can tell from, your business name is on your sign in here, have already made the commitment, you're in. But if not, do an assessment and ask before you give up that day job, is this really what you want? And a first question is, do you have the background and support? So whatever it is you want to do you have the personal experience and support from others who depend on you to go ahead and do this? Do you also have the risk tolerance to potentially give up a day job and be completely dependent on the fruits of your labor, so to speak, as a business owner? So that's an important thing to ask. It is not, the answer is not yes for everybody. I had a SCORE client when I was a relatively new mentor who came in, and I said, so tell me about your business plans. He said, I want to be a commercial real estate developer. And I said, great, do you have experience in real estate? He said, no. I asked, well, do you have any experience in the trades or in construction? He said, no. I said, okay. Do you have a lot of money? He said, no. And I said, well, I asked how he was going to do that. And needless to say, by the end of the conversation, just asking questions, he kind of decided he probably didn't want to be a commercial real estate developer after all. So I think it's important to be realistic and know that a gob of money is not just going to come your way magically to start a business. And a gob of talent is not just going to magically come your way to start a business about which you know nothing and for which you are unprepared. Do you understand your strengths, talents, preferences, passions? And related to that, obviously, do you understand your weaknesses? Some of the most successful entrepreneurs I know started their business with a clear understanding of what they do well and what they don't, and made plans to fill in the gaps, the areas where they were going to need help. Do you have the resources to get started? For most businesses, there's a substantial cash startup requirement. And that may include, thinking through whatever your expenses are to manage your life the way you manage it today. If you find you're spending, looking at your checking account statements for the last year, you're spending $3,000 a month on your personal expenses, well, figure you're going to have to provide that just to continue to live the way you live, as well as whatever your startup expenses are going to be for your business. And so you can do the math on that and figure out, until I get my revenue up to this level to manage my personal expenses, I need to be able to support that from something, from savings, and I need to be able to fund my startup expenses. So we'll go through a little bit more of that, but that's the quick assessment. Do you have the right stuff really to do this? And we certainly want to encourage you to go forward with business, but we also want you to go into it with eyes wide open. What are your life priorities? What's most important to you? For some people, they really want to accomplish something at which they are really good, and that's a perfect fit for an entrepreneur. Can you work independently? The answer for some people is a resounding yes, and for other people, maybe not so much. They're used to having somebody direct their work. Do you love what you're doing or what you will be doing in your business? Will you love it 24/7? I'm working with a machine shop owner, a third generation machine shop owner who does love what he's doing. But he said his challenge is he's quite successful financially, but he's working 70 hours a week. He said, fortunately, I love it, but it doesn't give him much time for anything else. Can you sell? For almost every business, the owner, founder, CEO is the key salesperson for that company. And that may sound funny because certainly for Microsoft, that's not true in terms of the CEO, but in a way it is, right? The bigger the company, the more likely you are to have a big sales force around you. But still, as the owner, CEO, you are going to be the key spokesperson, and probably when you're getting started, the one who's responsible for customer acquisition. Does financial uncertainty upset you? If you're going from a day job that provides you a steady paycheck to the great unknown of starting a business, just please remember that the financial returns are going to depend completely on the decisions you make and the success or lack of success that you have in your business. So be prepared for that. If you are not well suited to handle financial uncertainty, be aware of that and be aware of that's something that you need to deal with and recognize. You may be used to vacations, sick days, benefits, things like that. And remember, as a business owner, those are all things that you'll have to provide for yourself and your business, and when you have employees, for your employees. So a lot of things, if it's your first time going from being an employee to being a business owner, they're big changes. These are all very, very big changes. And they're very exciting and rewarding for successful business owners, but it can be very disruptive. So be aware of it. So I mentioned that before you start, you want to think through your personal budget considerations. And, the easiest way to do this is look back at your checking statements for the personal checking statements for the last year and look at what's been the cash outflow. If, like I said, you find you're spending $3,000 a month and your current employment supports that, well, remember, unless you're going to change your lifestyle significantly, you have to continue to provide that $3,000 a month just to, keep your head above water. And so you have to have a plan to get your business to that level before you give up that day job, or it's going to be disruptive. So what most startups do is they save enough money or they keep that day job until they get to the point where, yes, they can make the cutover and sustain themselves and manage those expenses with their business. And remember, in addition, for most businesses, there will be startup costs. So in addition to having enough money squirreled away to support you for your own living expenses, you will have whatever businesses expenses are required at whatever startup costs are, you have to meet to get in business. Okay. Again, we're just trying to get everybody to go into this with eyes wide open because it can be very exciting and rewarding, but we do get, unfortunately, a fair number of clients who come to us a year into business and they weren't well prepared on this stuff and they're struggling now because of it. They didn't go into it with enough savings and their cash flow is not up to where they need it and they're struggling. So just be aware that Those are problems that at least to some extent are avoidable. Okay, any questions about any of that or comments on any of that? I hope I didn't sound too negative. I didn't want to. Again, this is all about going in with eyes wide open, because it's a big change if you're coming from a steady job to starting out and going out on your own. Okay. If not, defining your concept, tip 2. So this is structured as a series of 4 questions, which, we think are really fundamental for any business. And by the time you have good, clear answers to these 4 questions, you've made big progress toward developing a business plan. And the first one is, who is your target customer? There's an attorney down in Fairfield County who's done quite a few workshops for SCORE. His name is Cliff Enico, and he works exclusively, I think almost exclusively anyway, with entrepreneurs, and has for many, many, many years. And he gives a lot of workshops on entrepreneurship. And he said repeatedly that the most successful business owners he knows are those who know their customers better than anybody else in the world. And I have found that to be true. If you really understand your customers, what they want, what they need, what they expect from you, it makes it so much easier to be successful in serving them and continuing to delight them. So make sure you understand that about your target market. And there's no question, there are some businesses for whom that's less important, but for most businesses, that's really vital. The second is, what problem are you solving for them? So got this image of your target customer or client. Now, what is it that you're going to do that makes you essential to them? What problem are you solving for them? Is it a big enough problem that there's a market for what you're offering? And how are you going to communicate that problem and your benefits to them? So the words here talk about features and benefits, and I think that's a useful breakdown. Feature is what you do. In this example, it's the car has an anti-lock braking system, ABS. The benefit is what the customer gets. You can stop on snow and ice without spinning. So I think that's a pretty clear example. And you want to be able to communicate the problem you're solving and your solution in terms of the benefits that it will provide for your customers. Does that make sense? Okay, so again, 1 and 2, who is my target client or customer? And number 2, what problem am I solving for them? And then, of course, the third question is, well, who else does that? Who else is in this business? Who's my competition? And I think that some business owners have a really good understanding of that before they start, and it really helps them a lot because they find their niche, they find their competitive advantage, and they're able to communicate that. But others somehow seem to get surprised by the fact that there's tons of competition out there and that they've got to scrape and claw their way in and get noticed and get recognized. And how are you going to do that? Is it going to be on price? Is it going to be on quality? Is it going to be on some difference in the product or service that you offer? What is it about your approach that will get a customer to choose you over your competitors? So you think carefully about that. So now you've got the 4 questions. Who's my target customer? What problem am I solving for them? Who are my competitors? And how will I differentiate myself? By the time you've got crisp answers to those questions, you've really gone a long way to framing up a business plan. Now, a lot of other things still have to happen, but you have a pretty clear focus on where you want to head. Pulling those things together, and one of our volunteers, who's a tremendous mentor and workshop leader and much more, Sarah Bletcher, has structured a little tool to help people construct their selling proposition, their value proposition from the answers to questions like that. Who's my target customer? What problem am I solving for them? Who am I differentiating myself? Really putting the answers to those things together can let you put your pitch together. And a value proposition is one way of doing that. What are you selling? What's the benefit to your customer? Why should they buy from you? It should be succinct and compelling when you get right down to it. Why would somebody do business with you? What's the benefit for them as a customer? And here are a couple of examples. And I Googled this right before this today to see, gee, I hadn't read these exact words for either Whole Foods or Zoom. And both of them have quite a few different marketing slogans that they use that are examples of this. So there's not just one for some companies, but you need to have the ability to boil it down to something that's very succinct and value oriented for your customers. Does that make sense? And these are two great examples of companies that have done a very nice job of differentiating themselves. Okay, so what is your value, and how are you taking that to market? And the the statement at the bottom I find amusing: use first, best, or only if you could back it up. I actually worked with a software company when I was a consultant that had the name First Best Software. So I guess you could say that was a rather bold move. It actually worked out for them, but it is a little unusual. But yeah, figure out what that is and make sure you can communicate it. So again, just to recap, who's my target customer or client? What problem am I solving for them? Who's my competition, and how will I differentiate my business? And the other thing I'll say about these questions is even companies that have been in business for a while can find it helpful to go back and look at these and sharpen their thinking, because the market continues to change. I mean, I'm an old guy, right? It changes faster now than it did when I was 20, certainly dramatically faster. And because I worked in the business of change my whole career, I accept that and like it and thrive on it. But remember, as a business owner, that the answers to these things might change for you over time by necessity. So it's a good idea to keep asking yourself these things. Any questions or comments on any of this so far? How's the pace? Is the pace okay? Too fast, too slow? Okay. Testing your business idea. So we often tell new clients who are on the at the idea stage of starting a business to start with research, start with market research. And whatever it is you want to do these days, you can do a Google search as if you're a customer for your future business, and you can see what you find, right? You'll see who's out there selling things similar to what you want to sell, and you'll see how they're selling them. We had a client the other day who is interested in starting a digital marketing business for other business owners, to help them with their own digital marketing efforts. And so, I asked her, one thing you can do to start is just do a search on what you would be searching for if you were a small business owner looking for that type of support, and see what's out there. And the observation we made for her is that this is a very high demand market, but there's also an enormous amount of competition. So you've got to find your place in that whole ecosystem, figure out how you are going to differentiate yourself. Okay. What is your market? Is it growing? Is it shrinking? And we all see in the economy around us that those things happen, month by month, year by year, and sometimes it seems day by day that markets grow and shrink. So you remember all those bookstores, some of us who are old enough anyway, all those bookstores we used to have until Amazon kind of disrupted that whole world. There's so many things. In fact, the expression emerged in corporate circles, so-and-so got Amazoned. That's happened with so many industries now. It started with books. So you have to be aware of the industry you're in and what are the trends that are happening within it. And your target market, your target customers. Do the research on that. Is this a growing demographic or a shrinking one? Are you located in the right part of the world, if that matters? And it may not in some businesses, but in some businesses that are very local, that may be a huge question. What's happening in my geographic market for the products and services that I want to sell? Is that a growing market? Is that a shrinking market? Is my target customer a growing or shrinking group? And can my product or service adapt to the changes in that market? So I think starting with research is a really good idea. Fortunately, there's a lot of a ton of information you can get, and we'll go through, I think we're going to go through some potential sources, but just Google searches can help you find an awful lot of information. And if I think we have some links to other sources here at the end. If not, we can talk through them. Research in particular your competitors. Like I said, in the case of digital marketing, there's enormous demand for that right now. Businesses of all sizes are consuming digital marketing support at unprecedented levels, but there's also an enormous amount of competition because of it. So many people have entered that market. If you're getting into a field like that, you just need to understand that landscape and understand what others are charging, so you set your pricing right. We had a client yesterday who had unrealistic expectations about both pricing on the demand side and on the supply side in that area recently for some of the skills that they were going to need to get into that field. And then assess your competition. So I think we've talked about that, but it's a matter of first understanding who they are. And in some markets, you can see that by driving or walking around. In other markets, you know, it's much more, it's a bigger market. You'll have to do online research. Here we go. Here's the list of data sources. Internet is in the middle. I would put that at the top because it's usually the fastest, cheapest, easiest for you. Chambers of commerce can be great. Many of our SCORE clients join chambers of commerce just to be able to network with other small business owners in their area. And in some businesses, that can be really helpful. If you're an accountant or an attorney, it can be really helpful to be in a local chamber of commerce because most of the business owners in there probably are going to need help from an accountant or attorney at some stage. So it's good to be able to network with them. Same if you're in, you know, some kind of a business support function. I mentioned digital marketing already. I mean, that's red hot. I have a SCORE client who builds websites, and she says she got her first 10 clients from her local chamber of commerce. So, you know, that's not only a source of data, that's a source of sales for you potentially. Civic organizations, census data, internet, libraries, trade associations, trade publications. At the bottom is SBDC. If you haven't heard about them, they are a wonderful organization and one of the best kept secrets out there. It stands for Small Business Development Corporation, I think. They're a nonprofit. They are actually kind of under the SBA's umbrella, like we are. Both SCORE and SBA and SBDC get some funding from the SBA. And SBDC, like SCORE, has mentors. Unlike SCORE, their mentors are paid. They're salaried people. There aren't very many of them. So they typically work with businesses that are a little farther along than we do. And spend more time with them, but they have a large library of resources and they have licenses that allow them to share those publications with their clients. So there are a lot of data sources that are not public that require a subscription that can be useful when you're doing research. And SBDC has licenses for a lot of those and can give you access. There's a location over by Yukon, and they can give you access to market information for an awful lot of businesses, and it can be very helpful. So be aware of that. I would put it, you know, in terms of ease of access, internet is probably the easiest. Libraries and SBDC might be the next two. And of course, chambers of commerce, that's a networking opportunity. And there are other organizations that may be great networking opportunities as well as sources of information, depending on what your business is.
Hey, John, while we're on this topic, we got a question from Jennifer about trying to figure out the growth trends for personal chefs in her area.
Boy. Yeah, that's a good one. So, you know, SBDC subscribes, like I said, to publications that get into industry by industry economic data that most people don't have access to. I know when I was a consultant at Accenture, we subscribed to all that stuff, and we had an internal support research team that I'd call and say, hey, can you get me some information on this, and this, and they'd go into that stuff and they'd come up with some data and give us a little report. You'll have to pull all that stuff together yourself, but SBDC can give you access to some of those resources. The rest, internet search, just keep refining your search. I I would think that the pandemic had a big positive impact on that market, but I don't know. And I know now that we're coming out of it, a lot of the early beneficiaries are losing that benefit. You know, Peloton, the company that makes the bikes and the expensive video streaming stuff to get you to work out harder. They had unbelievable sales growth during the early days of the pandemic, and now their sales are falling off the cliff. So I don't know what's happening in your business. It's a great question, but some of it you're going to find out by talking to your customers, and some of it you're going to find out by watching what happens. But you can try SBDC. I don't know if they'll have anything on that business. Any other questions? That's a good one. That's an example of one of those things where it may be hard to get reliable market data, and the best data you get may be your own experience and looking around.
Yeah, I was thinking looking around at who else is out there for the competition, kind of what the trend you're seeing in pricing, advertising approaches, things like that may give you an indication of what others view the market as, rather than trying to get actual firm data for an industry and a business that's pretty unique, right?
Yeah, the other thing to think about, I agree with all that. I think the other thing to think about is that there's overlap between a lot of industries. So even though as a personal chef, you may feel that your competition isn't restaurants and it isn't Uber Eats, at some level it is, right? Because those are options for somebody, as is Blue Apron. So there are a lot of different ways to think about it. Put yourself in the mindset of your consumer, and so you have to be the one who knows your customers better than anybody else. And their tastes and preferences may change too with everything. And the pandemic has had a huge influence on a lot of those decisions. I know the restaurants have really started filling up again. And okay. How much will you need to start? So I mentioned that part of the answer to that question is how much you need just to cover your own expenses. And the other part of it is, well, what do I need to start this business? So SCORE has a bunch of templates. So you can go to score.org and you can do a search in the search bar there on planning templates. And there's a whole section in there on financial planning templates that can be really helpful for there. I think there are about a dozen different models, templates, Excel spreadsheets typically, but I think you can also open them with Google Docs. And you can model your first year expenses with those. Find one that works for you, but think it through carefully. And this gives some examples here from high to low cost. Starting a manufacturing facility would be really expensive, right? I actually had a SCORE client who wanted to do that, and I asked if he'd done the math, and he said no. And I said, man, you might want to think it through. He wanted to do some pretty high-tech medical equipment manufacturing, and he was doing it working for somebody else. But I said, that sounds really expensive. I mean, I look around at the plant you work in and imagine what all that stuff costs. So, I mean, that would be a high-end cost to get in business. You'd need, a big space, you'd need expensive equipment, and you'd need machine operators. Restaurants are also pretty darn expensive. I mean, I've never bought one, but we actually have a restaurant broker who's a SCORE volunteer, and he helps people navigate that area all the time. Retail, just having a retail space and initial inventory, and then down near the bottom are more services and consulting type operations where, at least in principle, you can start without much stuff. It's mostly what's in your head and the heads of those around you. I mean, if you're a commercial landscaper, you have to have lawnmowers and equipment. But as a consultant, a lot of what you need is in your head or the heads of your associates. And your initial expenses will be whatever it takes for customer acquisition, to some combination of marketing and sales efforts. So know what the startup costs are for your business and think critically about them. We occasionally get a SCORE client who didn't think this through, and they're 6 months in and they realize they didn't budget enough for their startup expenses, and they're trying to start a business without the stuff they need, right? They can't fund it, and they're not able to pay their personal expenses. So that's an avoidable problem. It may mean that you're not ready yet. We also get startups who say, looks like I'm a year away. Once they do the math, I've got to save more money. We're going to talk a little bit about other sources of funding, but we're not quite there yet. So anyway, determining your cash needs, what are your startup costs, the things you need just to open the door and get your first revenue, and then ongoing operating expenses. They're two different lists. And depending on your business, both lists could be quite long and have some big numbers in them. So make sure you know what those items are for your business. And again, I don't think I've said this, but we can help you find a SCORE mentor who can help you think through this stuff critically. But an awful lot of what SCORE mentors really do is help you, as I said, think critically about what you're trying to accomplish, and give you some tools and templates that'll help you do that. Okay. So main thing is know your numbers, think through them, stay on top of them. Now, what are the sources of all this money that you need to get started? Well, notice at the top of the list is personal savings. Second is credit cards. Third is home equity mortgage. Fourth is family and friends. So there's a saying it's the 3 F's that fund most startups: founders, family, and friends. And remember that if you think a bank's going to fund you as a startup, it ain't going to happen. There are very rare exceptions to that. If you think investors are going to fund you as a startup, it ain't going to happen. Again, very rare exceptions to that. But and we can help you figure out if you're one of those rare exceptions. Steve and I had a client who, after talking to 20 banks who said no, found a Korean bank in New Jersey who said yes to his startup loan. Now, the guy was a serial entrepreneur who had had a lot of success in business up to that point. He was looking for a $3 million loan to buy an operation and retrofit it for a new business model. But he had a track record, right? And he had collateral too. I would guess he personally guaranteed that loan and was able to do it. But even with that, he found 20 banks said no before he found one who said yes. So just be aware that it's not easy to have anybody give you the money, even as a loan. So, and down farther on the list is crowdfunding. There are actually, some of you have heard about crowdfunding successes. We have heard about a few. We've heard about many who say, I spent time on it and I got $500, which isn't enough to get most people very far. And some say I got $5. So just be aware that crowdfunding really works if you have a truly compelling story and you hit a nerve for people, because that's a gift, unlike investment funding from an angel investor or a VC. Other resources, buy versus lease. For some businesses, that's fundamental because you may not have the capital to buy, but you may be able to lease something. On the other hand, quite often a funder for a lease will view it as interchangeable, whether it's a loan for a purchase or a loan for a lease is a loan from their perspective. So supplier credit. Look, in other words, the point here I guess I would make is that there may be lots of things you can do to improve your cash flow in year one, but you've got to at least have a game plan to get yourself started and to have basic funding. And again, SCORE templates can really help you with that, as can SCORE mentors. Okay. Any questions about that? Again, not trying to be negative. I want you to go in with eyes wide open. We would rather have you not be horrified and shocked and surprised by things that you could have known before. This is, I think, a very useful graphic. This came from one of our local banks. I don't think they would mind if I told you who they were. It's TD Bank. But all banks will tell you something like this or give you something like this. This is the cost of capital, basically, for you as a business owner. What's cheap and what's expensive. So if you can get a grant, God bless you. I mean, that's the cheapest source of capital, right? there aren't many grants for a startup. Most grants go to well-established nonprofits that have a solid track record of providing whatever it is the outcome is that this organization is trying to fund. But there occasionally are grants that target some specific objective, and you may qualify. The thing is, you're going to have to find those and research them yourself, because there really aren't any credible, reliable sources to do that. There are some charlatans out there who will offer to find a grant for you. Be careful. They'll often ask for some money up front. So be very careful with that. Borrowing from yourself or others is the lowest cost. After that, of course, crowdfunding is free if you can get it. Conventional banking loans are typically the cheapest loan you can get in terms of a loan. And they typically go to business loans, go to businesses that have been in business for at least 2 years. And they want to see growing cash flows, and they want to see that you have demonstrated you have the cash flow to make the loan payments that you need to make. So they love to make loans, but they love to get them repaid. So they want confidence that you have the capacity to do that. The next more expensive are SBA guaranteed loans. That's a misunderstanding some of our clients have. They think SBA loans are cheaper than conventional bank loans. Not true. SBA offers insurance to the bank to take on a client. They'll insure, I think it's 75% of the loan in case of a default. So that makes the bank more willing to offer the loan than they might be otherwise. But you pay a little more for that, right? Because there's overhead that the SBA is adding, and the bank's taking a little more risk than they really wanted to anyway. So you'll pay a higher rate of interest. You may qualify for an SBA loan that you didn't quite qualify for in a conventional loan. And if you're shopping for capital, we always suggest you go talk to 2 or 3 bankers and find out who has an appetite for the type of business you're in, and find out if they'll offer you a standard loan or an SBA loan, or some banks like doing SBA loans and some don't. Then the next higher in expense, but maybe better access, are CDFI, Community Development Financial Institutions. I think that stands for. They're typically nonprofits that operate as an intermediary working with multiple banks. So they pull together loans as a package. So we have one in our area called CEDF, wonderful organization. If they think you are a good risk, but not a good enough risk that banks or SBA will even give you a loan, they may find a loan for you. And the way they'll do that, they work with 10 banks, and each one will contribute a piece of what you need, and they'll bundle the whole thing. And again, you're going to pay higher interest for that. There's overhead with that. There are costs associated with that. You may qualify, and occasionally we have business owners who do qualify for a CEDF loan that they wouldn't have qualified for with a standard bank loan. And some of those are targeting specific business types and demographics. So you may benefit from something like that. And then alternative lenders, the word here is be careful. There are some very shady operators out there. There are people who are not shady, who can find capital for you, but it's typically at very high interest rates. And so you have to be very careful. And one classic example, there are a lot of people interested in becoming independent truckers now, because the word's out that the industry needs 80,000 more drivers, which is staggering. And it's hard to get the funds to buy your first truck. They've gotten very expensive over the last year, but many dealers will make a loan to you directly, but the interest rates are horrible. So that becomes a cost of running your business. Now you've got those interest payments. I think I'm going to go through this. How much we got left? Okay, we're almost done with my piece of this. Yeah, so these are the things banks typically, or other lenders, want to see. They look for a credit. Your credit score is probably the first thing they're going to look at. They look for your cash flow, your business knowledge. Collateral is really important. They're more likely to make a loan for you if you've got something you can offer as backing for that loan. If you own a home, they love to give you a home equity line of credit over other things because it's cheaper for them. They can take your house if if you default if you don't make the payments. So these are things you probably know about these. Character, commitment. They look for good financial history, and they look for credible financial projections. So, and SCORE can help you with those. We've got the templates, like I said, that can help you with the projections. But remember, they're going to look at any projections you give them skeptically, but you have to have them. They have to see that you have thought it through, and they have to be able to ask you questions. Okay, it shows me here that you're going to make $5 million next year and $3 this year. How is that going to happen? So you have to have realistic projections, and they'll ask you hard questions about it. Okay. And we talked a little bit about this, but talk about the 5 C's of credit: character, capacity, capital conditions, and collateral. And they have different indicators for these things. Character, a big part of what they look at is your credit score. Do you pay your bills on time? Capacity, they look for, what's in your bank statements for the last year. They want to see that you've got enough cash flow. Capital, they want to know what you've got in the bank, savings. If the business hits some hard times, do you have business money you can fall back on? And then they want to look at the conditions in your industry. And of course, like I said, any collateral that you may have. The guy I mentioned that Steve and I talked to, I'm sure he had a lot of collateral.
Hey, John, while we're on the topic of banking, we did get a question in from Michael, who's got a strong credit score, isn't inquiring about a loan, but noted that he hasn't been profitable as a sole proprietor during the pandemic, and was wondering if a bank would be willing to let him open a business bank account and a business credit card the same day. So not a full loan, but a bank account and a credit card. I'm thinking bank account, probably no problem. Credit card, they're probably going to want some income information to apply for that. What are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I would guess right on your answers. We may have a banker on right now. I'm not sure. Is Chad on?
He
Chad,
is.
if you heard that and want to go off mute and give your answer on that. But the other thing I would say, if Chad's not able to join us, Chad is a banker, and he is probably trying to do his job and pay somewhat attention to what we're doing here too. But ask, right? It's always a good idea, if you're shopping for business credit, get to know some bankers. So it never hurts to ask. And yeah, that's one way to build business credit, is get a business credit card. So, okay. Just to finish out this part of the topic, bootstrapping, if you haven't heard that, that's the idea of pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps. Sounds hard, but that's frankly the way most startups start. They save money, they start the business with their savings, and then they take revenue as they make it, and they reinvest what they can in growing the business. Let the business fund itself. Like I said, take some of that income that you're generating each month and reinvest it to grow. And I think we've talked about the rest of this stuff, but a big part of it is, get it to work on paper before you put your own money into things. Does that make sense? And that's where business planning comes in. So if there's no other questions, I'm going to turn it over to Steve. We've got a lot more to cover.
All right. Any questions as we're going through? Michael, I saw you had a follow-up question about information you do not need to give banks when opening a business bank account, meaning they may ask or pressure us, but may not be in our best interest to forwardly answer. I think to open a business bank account, it's going to probably be pretty basic information. Credit card, probably just going to be, it's going to be name, address, social security number, place of employment, income, that kind of thing. But I think, to John's point, reaching out to the bank and understanding what their requirements are and learning more, I think that's probably the best bet there. And
Yeah.
Chad's point about checking accounts are no issue for credit cards. Credit cards is based on personal credit score. Thanks, Chad, for chiming in on that. Let's see. We had a request here to put up the last slide, how to validate your concept.
Okay, you can do that, Mike.
Yeah. Let's see here. So this is the last slide here about validating your concept or building out a client base. This is really just, I think the point here, this is part of bootstrapping your business. I talk to clients about if they're really starting out and they're not quite sure of their product, their customer, their service, or really their pricing model, we talk about doing things as a proof of concept. And thinking about trying your product out, some targeted customers, maybe even some family and friends. And a lot of times when you're trying out something, you might want to do like a freebie, right? Hey, normally my pricing would be, 3 sessions for $99, but if you buy 3, I'll give you 1 free, that kind of thing. So that's the validating your concept. Think about it as a proof of concept to see what resonates with customers and get feedback. So
Yeah, I'm sorry I glossed over that. The other thing, if you haven't heard the term, there's a term that's used a lot called minimum viable product. MVP is the shorthand, and it often refers to some kind of a prototype, as Steve said. In the case of a physical product, it's just what it sounds like. But in the case of a service, the prototype is often discussions with target customers, and you may need to have a bunch of them. And it's really to test your idea and test the waters before you throw a lot of money into it.
right.
It's done with software all the time. I have a client right now who's developing prototype software to test an idea with customers.
All right, so we're gonna move on to the second half of our conversation. The first is really understanding the business environment. So we're gonna cover some legal, insurance, and financial matters. Just first, my background and experience is about 25 years in finance and accounting. I'm going to talk about some legal concepts first. Just in my disclosure here, I'm not a lawyer. Don't take this as legal advice. The best advice I can give you in starting your business is to consult with a business attorney. It's probably your best bet to understand the key aspects for your business. So now that you've going through what John's talked about identifying your customer, a problem you're trying to solve, validating your concept, doing your research, developing your product and service. Now it comes down to like getting into the business aspect of things. So one of the first things you're going to want to do is forming what's called a legal entity. And there's different types that you can use. There's different advantages and disadvantages to these. We do recommend that you consult with an attorney to the extent you need to get advice on this one. It really depends on the complexity of your business, the capital structure, and what your growth expectations are. But we're going to talk about each of those examples as we go through these in more detail. So the first is what's called a sole proprietorship. I would say this is probably the more common way that people start their business. It's a simple structure. You're starting out things on your own. It's very low cost to form. It avoids this concept called double taxation, which double taxation is really an issue for large corporations. Smaller businesses don't have that. So there is some upside to a sole proprietorship from a tax standpoint, but there is a big watch out, and that's that you don't get inherent liability protection. You can get insurance to help mitigate that, which we're going to talk about. But there's no inherent liability protection when you open up a sole proprietorship. So what does that mean? That means that if it's your name on the business and there's no legal entity that has liability protection behind it, if you were to get sued, someone could go after your personal assets in addition to any business assets. So that's what that means. From a tax standpoint, the income that you earn on your business gets reported on your personal tax return. There's no separate return you fill out. There's also this concept of DBA, which is doing business as, and this could be, I'm Steve Mahoney, I've got my own business, but, my business name is, Steve's Accounting Services. And that's the DBA that I would list on my advertising. So sole proprietorship is very simple. It's not what we really recommend for folks. And that's the next one, which is called a limited liability company, or an LLC. This is what I would say the most common one that we recommend for businesses that are getting started out. It does avoid the double taxation issue, same as the sole proprietorship. It gives you a flexible capital structure in terms of how you set things up. There is small filing fees to set it up, but it's pretty small. It's inexpensive to set up. And the nice thing about an LLC is that it gives you the flexibility in how you're setting it up, but it also gives you that liability protection, which is in the name of it, limited liability company. So this helps you shield the liability protection of the assets of the business inside the LLC legal entity, which is separate from your personal assets. So this is a reason that we like to recommend people set this one up. Um, the In terms of taxes, the way the limited liability tax process works is your limited liability company earns income, and someone needs to pay taxes on that income. What happens is that income flows through to your personal return. So when you file your personal tax return, if you owned an LLC, you would report the earnings from that LLC on your personal tax return, and you would pay taxes there. So that's just kind of mechanically how that works. The other examples you may hear people talk about are corporations. You may hear people say, well, I'm going to form an S Corp or a C Corp. C Corps are really large organizations. So these are your Amazons, your Facebooks, or even just kind of medium-sized organizations. All of the publicly traded companies that you read about are C Corps. Generally, if you're just getting started out as a small business owner, you're not going to need to form a C Corp. You may hear about an S Corp and think that that's the way to go. S Corp has a very similar structure to an LLC in terms of tax implications, meaning you as an owner of an S Corp would pay the taxes on that, your share of the S Corp's earnings, similar to an LLC. The downside to an S Corp is when you form a corporation, there's more administrative responsibilities. You need to identify shareholders. You need to set up articles of incorporation. You need to identify officers for the corporation, have officer meetings, shareholder meetings, that sort of thing. There's just a little bit more structure and what are sometimes considered administrative tasks. So if you're just getting started out, LLC is probably the way to go. Usually when I talk to folks about setting up an LLC versus an S Corp, there's kind of a higher bar in terms of what you would need to consider if you're going to set up an S Corp. The last concept in terms of legal entity, and then I'll pause for questions, is around partnerships. A lot of times people say, oh, I'm going into business with a friend of mine. We're going to be 50-50 partners. We've both got, great ideas. We both bring different things to the table. And maybe they form an LLC that's 50% owned by each. The thing that we really encourage folks to do is to have a partnership agreement. It's really an operating agreement. And what this does is it documents the responsibilities of the parties. And you may think going into a business that, well, we're in agreement. We both want to do this. This is going to be great. We're going to sell to our customers and make some money. And this is fantastic. But if you're 50-50 owned, it's important to put on paper who's responsible for what. And you can see in the bullet here, it says this acts as the what if document. And when everyone's starting a business, no one really wants to think about something going wrong, but a partnership operating agreement can help protect you and your partner if something goes wrong. It could be something like, if the business dissolves, or if someone decides they don't want to be in the business anymore, or it could be, God forbid somebody gets ill or passes away. But from a positive standpoint, it could be if someone wants to buy your business. Having a partnership agreement that identifies who has decision-making rights on things like that. So it's really important to do, and you can see here it can help avoid some costly legal disputes later. And if you're entering into a partnership, it's best to get legal representation so that someone's got your interests in mind. So it's just something to keep in mind if you're getting into a 50-50 partnership. These are a few other items to consider. These are called kind of the little details here, and you can read them all on the page here. A few key ones to highlight: getting an employer identification number, researching if you need to collect and remit state sales tax. You can do that through the state of Connecticut small business website. They've got some great information there. Some businesses might need to have a license. You might need to be licensed to do your business. Other businesses don't. And then you can research that in your and through the state website. That'll kind of give you the rules of the road on that, or contact them and they can help you understand if you need to be licensed based on the nature of your business. one of my kind of first top 5 pieces of advice to business owners is this one on the right here, which is getting a business checking account. It's very important that you keep your business and your personal financial transactions separate from each other. It really helps you come tax time to have a clean set of records. And we're going to talk about record keeping in a little while, but that's just an important one to consider. And then understanding regulations, right? There's a lot of items here, and some of these may or may not be applicable to you. If you're operating a consulting service out of your house, like I've got some clients who do that, they're not going to need to worry about zoning. But if you're opening a restaurant or a bar, you're going to need to worry about where you're going to put your facility and what the zoning restrictions are. Talked about business licenses and approvals, understanding that. If you're going to be renting, you're going to have to understand what your landlord's considerations are. And then we talked about just the items on the right, I think are pretty obvious here, especially if you're going to be having employees, understanding, accommodations for ADA, the American Disabilities Act, what labor laws, immigration laws are, things like that. If you're just starting out by yourself and you're not going to have employees, you may not need to understand these yet, but the larger you grow and the more you start hiring teams of people, it opens up new items to research. And then just down here on the right, the sales tax concept is an important one to research and understand. In terms of where to get more information on this, the SCORE website's got a lot of good information, as John mentioned at the top. Our resource library has got a lot of great articles, blogs, information where you can search on a topic and learn more about it. And then also, like I said, the State of Connecticut Small Business website has got some great information there as well. Any questions about the legal landscape? All right. So we're going to move on to insurance. I think most folks are familiar with the concept of insurance, right? A lot of us have to get this for our homes or our apartments or our cars. But for your business, you also need to consider getting insurance to protect yourself from any business risks. This is all about trying to mitigate risks depending upon the nature of your business. General liability is one that, we generally encourage people to talk to an insurance agent about and consider protecting your business for general liability insurance. This kind of covers if something goes wrong with a customer service or product and they decide to sue you. Property insurance to the extent that you've got a physical location. Motor vehicles, if you have, John's example of the landscaping services business, right? They may have trucks and mowers and things like that they may need to have insurance on. One piece of advice that I learned from one of our co-mentors who worked for Travelers for 25, 30 years is one of the big problems he noticed with businesses were people had employees driving company-owned cars, and employees' driving records were terrible, and it turned into a real insurance nightmare. So his advice to our clients was always, if you have people that are doing driving on behalf of your business, check their driving record and make sure you understand what their driving record is. Workers' compensation and health and life benefits, to the extent you have employees and want to provide those insurances. And then business specific ones, right? If you're having, if there's an event that comes up, if you need to protect yourself against loss of income, if you're owning a bar or restaurant and you're serving liquor, any issues if you're shipping products out to customers, there could be unique aspects for what you might need. A lot of times when I'm talking to clients about how to think through this concept, my best piece of advice is to A, shop around, and B, if you already have an insurance company that you worked with for your auto or your home or apartment, start with them and see what they have for business insurance available. You're going to find that your insurance needs are going to vary by your business. Someone who's running a consulting services is going to need much different insurance coverage than somebody who's running a physical location like a restaurant. So just consider that as you're thinking through the insurance needs. This last concept is one where I like to talk to clients about thinking about a team of professionals being your group of advisors, the clients that I've worked with that I found have been most successful, and John talked about this up front as well, are the ones that have not only a good understanding of their customers and product and services, but also the aspects of what it takes to run a business, which are different skill sets than the expertise you have for your product. And if you don't have that expertise inherently or through your experience, finding the right people who can help you with your business needs, developing a relationship with a banker and keeping that relationship is very important. And they'll be able to help you when you need financing, or when they can help you solve problems and think through issues. Having a business lawyer you can consult with, having an accountant that you can work with who can do your taxes and maybe do your bookkeeping. We're going to talk about some financials in a little bit. I always tell my clients, I would much rather have you worrying about selling to your clients and delivering a top quality product or service than worrying about trying to understand the tax code. It's worth it for you to spend a little bit of money and hire somebody to take care of that for you. We talked about having an insurance agent. Your SCORE mentor can be part of your team of professionals and advisors. It's what we do. It's what we're passionate about doing, is helping business owners. And our mentoring services are free. So we're here to help you think through some things, and help, as John said at the beginning, we'll help and coach and mentor, but you also want to keep your eyes wide open in terms of the risks you're facing and help you manage through those. Business peers. This is one that, sometimes folk think of the competition as someone they should try to avoid because they're in competition with them. Sometimes other people in your local community, whether they're competition directly or indirectly, maybe they're somewhat affiliated with your type of business, they can be good people to network with. Sometimes you can find businesses that are somewhat related to your field and have similar customer profiles that you can pair up with and develop marketing events, right? Maybe you run a hair salon, but you can go meet up with the person who runs a massage salon and someone who runs a nail salon, and the three of you can get together and have a marketing event and try to get customers together. So these are just some examples of building out your network beyond just the people that you may typically think of. And then, trade organizations. John talked a little bit about trade chambers of commerce earlier. These can be good resources of people to meet with, and kind of learn more about what's available in your community. Let me pause there and see if there's any questions. I covered a lot in the last kind of 15, 20 minutes. Any questions around legal, insurance? All right, I'm not seeing anything in the chat either. All right, so we're going to move over to financials. So I guess the first thing I would start with is you don't need to be an accountant to understand and manage your financials, but you do need to know your numbers. And it's important to work with your accountant, work with your SCORE mentor to understand how your business is doing financially. Because what that's going to do is it's going to help you plan for the future. It's going to help you understand, where you can invest in your business, how much money you could take out of your business for your own personal cash needs, and how you can think through mitigating any financial risks that you've got ahead of you. So we're going to cover some high-level financial concepts, and I'll hit these at a bit of a high level. I will tell you that, this is an area that SCORE can provide a lot of assistance in. I have a number of clients that I've been working with, some who are just starting out, some who've been in business for, 10, 20, 30 years, who I help them kind of think through managing their financials and understanding their financials and planning for the future. So like I said, you don't have to be an accountant or financial expert, but it's important for you to know your numbers. So let's talk about a few concepts. The first is, starting with pricing, and it kind of starts with revenue. This is the money that you're bringing in the door, what you're charging your customers. There's a number of functions here. You could look at, what's sometimes called a cost plus model, which is how much does it cost for your product or service, and then how much profit you want to put on top of that. But you have to be mindful of what the competitor's pricing is, and also what a customer is willing to pay. You can increase your price all you want to try to increase your profit margin, but if a customer is not willing to pay that, and a competitor is priced below you, then nobody's going to buy your product or service. So there's this tight, kind of equilibrium that happens between the competitive market, what a customer is willing to pay, and what your pricing desire is. That's going to help create that healthy tension of where the pricing will settle in. There's a term called cost of goods. If you're in a production environment, like if you're making a product to sell, you're creating t-shirts or you're creating candles, kind of any kind of tangible product that you might be selling, there's a cost to manufacture and create that product. That's your cost of goods sold. You could also look at your, the cost to perform your service as kind of a cost of goods sold. Sometimes that's more looked at with your payroll expenses, which is the next item. A lot of times when you're looking at your cost structure, I try to encourage my clients to think about their costs in two different categories. One are variable costs and one are fixed costs. Variable costs are items that are tied to revenue volume. So these are things that are, maybe it's the cost of goods sold to produce your product. Maybe it's a commission that you've got to pay for every time you sell something. You've got to pay somebody a commission because they helped you secure that sale through a business lead. Or maybe it's what's considered variable payroll, right? If you've got to hire more people because your business volume goes up, people who are on the front line producing something in a manufacturing facility, that might be considered variable payroll. Counter to that is what are called fixed costs. And this is sometimes called overhead. These are costs that are the same no matter how much business volume you have. So the easy example is rent. If you have a restaurant and you're paying rent to the landlord, and that rent is $1,000 a month, if you sold, if you had 100 customers come in today or 0 customers come in today, you're going to have to pay that rent no matter what. Same thing with your utilities costs, your insurance, and what's considered fixed payroll, right? So, an example of fixed payroll might be if you were in a service business and let's say you had a painting business and you were out, painting clients' houses. And let's say you had an office assistant who was there to help keep, book appointments, manage the schedule, do payroll, things like that. The office assistant is going to get paid no matter how many painting customers you have. So that's an example of fixed payroll. It's helpful to understand the difference between variable and fixed costs because the more your revenue increases, your variable costs will go up, but your fixed costs are always going to be there. So it helps understand and help inform the next concept, which is called profit margin. And this is really your revenue minus your expenses. And it's as simple as that. So there's 3 types of financial statements that we're going to cover really quickly in a minute. And I'll give you a kind of a quick drive through of how to look at them. One is the balance sheet, one is the income statement, and the third is the cash flow. They are all 3 different types of financial statements, but they're all, I would say, equally important because they tell you different things. Any questions about any of these concepts?
Steve, you had one that came in via chat. How important is it and when might it be more appropriate to hire a CPA versus an accountant? Can a solopreneur do all the accounting and bookkeeping using QuickBooks for their first several $100,000 earned?
It's a good question. We're going to get to that in a couple of minutes. The answer really depends on a number of factors. So, pause that question. I'm going to put that in the parking lot for a minute. And I'm going to cover that in a couple of minutes.
Okay. There's another one about taxes. Do you want to pause that too?
So running a business out of your home is additional taxes we have to worry about. What it really comes down to is there may be, and again, I'm not a tax CPA, but I know a little bit about the universe to help inform you on this. There may be opportunities for you to deduct costs that you are paying, as part of your running your business out of your house. If they're used to support your business, you may be able to be able to deduct those expenses on your business tax return, but the rules on that are pretty specific. So my best advice is to consult with a CPA on this because it's a very common question and they can give you a pretty straightforward answer on that one. Or you could also, TurboTax has got a great library of information If you think you can get kind of a simple answer on that one, they're kind of a good resource that I have found. But if it becomes a little bit gray and you're not sure, I'd consult with a CPA. All right, so let's keep going. So the first balance sheet, or the first financial statement we're going to look at, is called a balance sheet. And I'll just give you a kind of an overview of how to read this. So just to describe what's on here. So there's 3 categories of a balance sheet. The first are called assets. This is what your company has and what people may owe you. So these are items that you own. Liabilities are what your company owes to other people. And we're going to go through examples of these in a minute. And equity is your company's net worth. So this is sometimes called the book value of your company. And the formula is basically equity equals your assets minus your liabilities. So the first thing you'll notice about a balance sheet is in the name is that it's balanced. So you can see in this example, the total assets of this are listed on the left-hand side, and the total assets for this company add up to $910,000. Over on the right-hand side, the company has liabilities of $450,000. And it has equity of $460,000. When you add your liabilities plus your equity, the sum of that is $910,000, which is equal to the assets. So that is the formula in any balance sheet: is assets equal the sum of your liabilities plus your equity. So let's talk about what's in all of these items. So your assets are basically the items that you own. So in this business, they've got cash in their bank account. They've got some short-term investments, which could be some, CDs or mutual funds. Accounts receivable. These are amounts that are owed to you by customers that have purchased your product. So maybe you sold something on credit and they just haven't paid you yet. Inventory. I think the example here is kind of a retailer. Let's say they've got inventory in their shop that they haven't sold yet. That's an asset to them. Prepaid insurance, if you paid your insurance in, a year in advance, that's an asset to you that'll eventually be expensed over time. Here you can see they've got other investments that they've invested their cash in. Property, plant, and equipment. This could be if they've got a physical location, like they own the land, they own the building and equipment. Fixed assets get depreciated over a long period of time, which means that you buy an equipment and then it depreciates into your earnings over a 10 to 20 year period. That's a concept called depreciation. Goodwill is not very common. Goodwill is what's called an intangible asset and really arises when you buy another company. I'm not going to go into depth on that one because it's not really going to be applicable for a lot of folks on this meeting. So those are your assets. Again, these are all things that you own. Liabilities, these are amounts that you owe to other parties. So accounts payable. Accounts payable are going to be amounts you owe to vendors. So in this example, if they're a retailer and they've bought inventory for future sales, but they haven't paid their vendors yet, that's going to be an amount that's owed. Salaries could be an amount that you owe your employees. Interest payable, if you took out debt and you haven't paid your interest yet. So other items you can see on here, like the taxes would just be amount that you owe to the government for your taxes. And then the next few items are your debt, right? So you owe, your notes payable and your bank loan show up as liabilities because you owe that money to people. And, income taxes is another liability. And then you get down to your equity, and there's really a few things that impact your shareholders' equity. The first is amount that you've put into the business. The second is amount you've taken out of the business, which would just be, capital contributions in or owners withdrawals out. The two of those kind of net out to your equity. And the other is the cumulative earnings that your business has earned, which is called retained earnings. And that's the sum of everything that your business has earned over time. And again, this business here would have a net book value or an equity of $460,000. And someone would say, okay, you own $910,000 of assets. You owe others $450,000 in liabilities. Your net book value is $460,000. That's your owner's equity. Any questions on the balance sheet? Okay. So the other key financial item is called an income statement, sometimes called a P&L. P&L stands for profit and loss. If you hear anybody describe an income statement, a profit and loss statement, or a P&L, it's all the same thing. There's a basic formula in looking at an income statement. You start here with your sales revenue. This is money you're bringing in from customers. You can subtract out your cost of goods sold, which gives you your gross profit. Then you can subtract out your operating expenses, which gives you what people may call operating profit. And then you're going to pay your interest and taxes, which should be interest on your debt and taxes on your profits. And that gives you what's called your net income. This is your bottom line income on what your business has earned after you've collected all your revenue and paid all your expenses. So here you can see, just going back to our retailer example, they've sold $250,000 in sales revenue for this period of time ending June 30th. They had the cost of goods. The cost of that product that they sold was $90,000. So that meant that they bought it for $90,000. They sold it for $250,000. Their gross profit was $160,000. This is a retailer example. So it looks like they also sublease some of their property. So they've, received rent on that sublease income, and they've got total revenue coming in the door of $165,000. And then they look at their expenses. So they've spent money on advertising. You can see all these items here. I'm not going to read them, but here are some of those selling and distribution costs those help generate revenue. And then they've got their depreciation costs, some of those fixed costs that we talked about earlier, like insurance and rent, and then some of their salaries. And then they get down to here, their total expenses are $105,000 and their profit. Now, this example hasn't factored in interest and taxes yet, but their profit would be their $165,000 of revenue minus $105,000 of expenses gives them $60,000 of profit. So that's the way to look at an income statement. One important thing to think about is your income statement gives you a summary of activity over a period of time, meaning this gives you their sales revenue for the year ended June 30th. So it's from January 1st through June 30th, right? Over that period of time. A balance sheet is a different example. A balance sheet is what I call a snapshot as of a point in time. Think of it as taking a picture of your financial business as of a certain date. It's not over a period of time. It's a picture as of that date. So in this example, we're looking at this company on December 31st, 2023. So it's a different concept, a different lens of looking at your business. So the easy example would be on December 31st, this business had $100,000 in cash on that date in the bank. The next day, that number will be different because they would have collected cash and paid cash. So different concept. Balance sheet as of a point in time, it's a picture. Income statement gives you a sense of what happened over a period of time from a beginning point to an ending point. One last point on the financial statements is what's called a cash flow statement. Cash flow statement's pretty easy to understand. It's really the difference between money going in and out of the business over the course of an accounting period. So it's pretty simple. Your cash flow is positive when your money coming in exceeds your disbursements, and it's negative when the opposite is the case, when your money going out the door is higher than the money coming in. Cash flow is probably the thing that I work on the most with my clients in terms of the key financial information to look at. It can help you understand, how much you need to start up your business. And startup companies, you have this phrase here, live close to the edge. It's critical to understand how much cash you're going to need before you start your business, those startup costs, and how much cash you're going to need as you're going through, running the business month to month. Cash flow is a little bit different than an income statement. The income statement is prepared on an accounting basis. Cash flow is simply the cash money coming in and out the door. We don't have enough time to kind of go into all the details there, but they are a little bit different view of things. And again, it's important from a startup standpoint to manage cash very tightly. Looks like we had a question. Oh, okay, that's just a thank you. So accounting, we talked a little bit about this in the question before. I think the key way to answer this question, I recommend to folks, when you're first starting out, you can keep track of things in an Excel spreadsheet. But the more you start bringing in revenue and having expenses, I really recommend people use a software. QuickBooks is the most common one people use. It's worth it because it's an existing system that allows you to track information and record information very easily. And it's just worth the investment as a tool to run your business. Then the question becomes, do you hire a CPA or an accountant to do things, or do you do it yourself? There's two aspects of this. One is bookkeeping, which is keeping track of all your financial records. If it's a simple business just starting out, you could probably do it yourself and figure it out by getting some training or watching some YouTube videos and learning it. But the more your business grows or gets more complex, or if this is just not in your wheelhouse, it might make sense to hire somebody who can do the bookkeeping for you. So the first task is bookkeeping. The second task is your income taxes. This is one I really recommend. Once your business gets up and running and you've got revenue coming in and expenses, and you're dealing with your personal tax situation and your business tax situation, it's worth it to consult with an accountant and a CPA who can help you manage this and do your taxes for you. They can help you identify the deductions, make sure you're filing what you need to file, when you need to file it. You may need to make estimated tax payments throughout the year. They can help you with that. It's just worth it to make that investment of time and money to do that. So I see we're getting a little bit tight on time, so I'm going to try to keep us moving. If there's any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll try to get to them. Record keeping and taxes. I think we kind of talked a little about this just now. It's really important to keep good records for your business. It's not just for income tax or financial purposes, but it's also for things like employee files, customer records, contracts, vendor records and contracts. Record keeping is very important. It can really save you when you're trying to answer questions down the road or when you do your taxes. I mentioned sales tax earlier. This is unique to every business. Some businesses may not be required to collect or remit sales tax, but some are required to do it. Basically, you collect it from your customer and then you have to remit it to the state, and you have to fill out a form periodically with the state. The best advice I can give you is to consult with the state of Connecticut Department of Revenue Services. Find out what the rules are for your business. Make sure you set up a process and that you're in compliance with this. It will just help you save a lot of time down the road. Any questions on financials?
Steve, we had another one about, can we consult with accountants or CPAs without hiring them as our person who files, or is that not a thing?
It depends. I mean, some CPAs might be, they may offer some sort of consultative services. There may be like a free, consultation that can help you kind of learn what might be best for your business. And some you just might need to hire them to actually do the work, but I would consult with them and understand what services they offer and what rates they charge. And then the other question is about whether to choose a CPA in the place of a non-CPA. You're going to want to have somebody who is a CPA definitely need a CPA to do your taxes. Whether you get an accountant who's not licensed as a CPA to do your bookkeeping, I don't even know how many of those are out there. A lot of them you're going to find that if they're in the business of accounting, they're going to be a licensed CPA.
One trend we're seeing, though, is there are a number of accounting firms, often small ones, that work with small business owners a lot, who will outsource bookkeeping. So they hire some bookkeepers who will do contract bookkeeping for their clients at a lower cost than it would be to have a CPA doing. You don't want a CPA doing your bookkeeping for you. So we do see clients who take advantage of that, because it can sometimes be difficult to hire a bookkeeper for the amount of time you need. It may be more cost effective to get a part-time person contracted through somebody else. Right,
exactly. So our next topic is around business and marketing plans. I know we're coming up against the clock, but this is some important information. So we're going to keep going. Understand if you have to drop off, but we'll get the recording out to folks. But this is some good information, and we've got some tools and resources at the end that we'll cover. So just quickly on a business plan, we've talked about a lot of things at the beginning so far. Developing a business plan is important. And the first question is kind of, what is a business plan? And it's really a living document that helps you understand and articulate what your goals for your business are. It's really about, it's a way for you to organize your thoughts and ideas in a way to try to help you understand what you want to do and how you're going to do it. The key point is that it's a living document because you're going to want to revisit it a few times a year. You don't just do it and put it away forever. Here are the types of things that you would include in a typical business plan. And you don't have to do all of these things on day one. You may do parts of it and then revise it and update it and enhance it as the year goes on. The key question, there's a point down here about your plan will be read by knowledgeable, skeptical people. So we talked about what is a business plan. The next question is, who is it for? And the answer is, it depends. It could be for a bank if you're trying to get a loan. It could be for investors if you're trying to get an equity investor or borrow from an investor. It could be for business partners if you want to go into business with somebody and say, hey, you want to join my business? Here's my business plan. Could be for some of your employees if you're trying to hire them and say, hey, here's what we're trying to do. Or it could be other people you're trying to partner with. But most importantly is this one at the bottom. It's for you. And so we have various templates and resources that we provide our clients. The first thing that we do is we give them a one-page business plan. It's a simple template to help you organize your thoughts. One of my clients on here today is working on one of these for her business because she's just getting started. And it's a one-page business plan for you to get your thoughts going. Now, if you get to a point where you've built out your business plan, your sales strategy, your marketing strategy, your financial plan, and you're thinking about going to investors or to a bank, you may need to have something more comprehensive that might be 20, 30 pages. But to start out, it's really, we have a one-page template that we can help you think through some key questions and help you get your thoughts organized. And then you can build on that over time. One of the key aspects of a business plan is doing what's called a SWOT assessment. And this stands for, you can see over on the left, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And I will tell you that every company, or every well-run company, does this sort of thing pretty frequently. I worked at a very large organization. We looked at the competition and we looked at our strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats, a couple times a year, especially as part of our business planning and risk assessment. And the way to think about this is, looking at strengths and weaknesses are more internally focused. These are things that you do well, or that maybe you have a gap on, or the capabilities that your employees have. What are the things that you bring to your customer and to the market, or what are the things that you need help on that are a weakness for you? Opportunities and threats are more external. So opportunities might be, these are things that you can't necessarily control, but you need to understand what they are and have a plan of attack against them. So opportunities might be, where's the market going for your business? Is it growing or shrinking? Maybe there's a new, potential customer demographic that you think would really benefit from your product or service. That may be an opportunity. A threat might be a new competitor in the space, or, maybe there's a big supply chain issue with a key ingredient to your product. So these are external origins that you can't always control, but you need to have an understanding of what they are, and then do a risk assessment if you need to put a mitigation plan in place to do something about them. So the key part about developing a SWOT analysis are these concepts over here. One is, you want to make sure you're looking at it frequently, once or twice a year. Having honesty and clarity about this, looking, truthfully at the margin or at the market and understand what's out there, looking internally to understand where your gaps are and your weaknesses. So that's part of that honesty question of doing a key assessment of things. So a quick few comments about marketing. I'm not a marketing expert, but John and I have a fantastic marketing expert in our chapter who thankfully has taught us a lot. And she has, helped kind of develop some great skills. Here are some things to consider in marketing and promoting your product. Thinking about getting your brand out there, building your brand, understanding what your mission is, how you want to sell your brand to your customers. This concept of building a connection and a relationship with your customers, and then generating sales from existing customers. The thing that Sarah Bletcher, our marketing expert, has taught us is that, until you convince someone to become a customer, they're a stranger. And part of your strategy is turning a stranger into a customer. And the best way to do that is through referrals. So that's what we talked about, starting your business out with a proof of concept, maybe getting families and friends, maybe developing those into referrals, turning those referrals into new customers. It becomes kind of a flywheel circle where you can kind of continue that revenue flywheel. So here's some other ideas here. Just kind of, it's really about listening to your customers and understanding what the market is. It sounds pretty obvious, but those are the key aspects of it. Here are some ideas of ways to get out there. Different ways. It really depends on your business and your target customer. The whole concept of social media. I mean, there's, probably half a dozen to 10 different social media platforms that are out there. Understanding your customer demographic and who you're targeting for your service or product, that's going to help tailor which social media platform you go to, whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn, or TikTok. So that's just an example of how you can utilize some of these things to help with your business. So just putting it all together in the concept of a business plan, we talked early on about kind of the problem you're trying to solve, how you're going to solve it, how you differentiate yourself. These are the foundational aspects of building out a business plan. Then kind of going to what's your target market? Who are your target customers? How do you understand and deliver your message and your brand to those customers? Then how you're going to sell. And these are all part of, the sales plan over here of developing your product definition and your value proposition, developing marketing plans to help, bring that product or service to market, and then selling that out to the customers. So it's all a very integrated plan. I know I went through the business planning and marketing concepts quickly, but any questions or comments on that topic? So we do have a comment here about a few different senior business people that never do business with family or close friends. Your thought on this as we're just starting out. I think there's and John, I'm interested in your perspective on this one. I think there's the quote doing business with. I think some of it could be a matter of, borrowing from family or friends can be sometimes dicey. But, what we were talking about engaging with family or friends, it was more about kind of going out to them and saying, hey, I'm starting a business. I've got this product or service idea. I'm testing it out as a proof of concept. Would you be willing to help test my product, take my class, and let me know what you think about it to give me some feedback? So that's different than kind of entering into a partnership with your best friend, where if the business goes under, your friendship might be dissolved. Or if you get into a financial dispute, your friendship might be harmed. That's my opinion. John, what do you think about that?
Oh, I agree. I think it depends so much on the business and your friendships and your families and all that. So I know I have done business with business owners who are personal friends, and it's worked out great. It depends on everything.
Great. Okay. All right, so we're going to wrap it up with some tools and resources, and then if there's any other final questions, we'll do that. So here's some information here. Our SCORE website, you can see score.org, or our chapters is greaterhartfordscore.org. You can check that out. Tons of information there. The Connecticut Business website is here, and there's also information on kind of Department of Consumer Protection. You can learn more about that, about licensing. A lot of businesses were really needed information on the CARES Act. Less of an issue now than it was maybe a year ago, but you can check that out through the Treasury's website. We've got a lot of on-demand training on our website. There's one on a startup roadmap, which is good. There's a checklist for starting a business in Connecticut, which is very helpful. And then Simple Steps is a multi-part program that SCORE offers nationally. It's kind of our flagship program. It goes deeper on a lot of the concepts we talked about today. It's multi-parts. It's available on demand, or there's national webinars that you could subscribe to as well. This is more of just a high level, get you grounded on a number of concepts, but more about a higher level. So that's really it. I think hopefully you got a lot out of this. As John said at the beginning, it's tough doing business. It's not for everybody. And our goal as mentors and in this workshop is really to make sure you go in eyes wide open. I think it's a great phrase. There's a lot of support and resources you can tap into in your community through SCORE, or through other resources online to help you. You're not in it alone. But the key things are focusing on what you do best. What's your superpower that you bring to your customers and to the market, knowing your market and your customers and your competition, and then learning and adapting, right? And taking every customer experience and learning from that and how you can improve things. So that's the end of our formal slides here. I'll pause here to see if we have any other questions. I see some few things in the chat.
A few
It's
more.
mostly thank yous.
One real easy one. How do you get a SCORE mentors? The easiest way is go to score.org. Broadly speaking, there are three things you can do. You can find a mentor, you can shop, or you can browse the library. So click on find a mentor, and there are different paths you can take. You can actually search and see who's who, look at their profiles, or you can just request a mentor and one will be assigned to you based largely on your location. Does that make sense? And we have a terrific we have more than one, but we have one really terrific marketing person in our chapter, and we have one restaurant broker. If you come in with a restaurant question, it's going to go to him, subject to his availability.
Yeah. Can you see my web browser here?
Yep. Yes.
Yeah. So this is our website. It's score.org. You just select find a mentor. You'll have to fill out a small form. The best advice I give people is be as specific as you can in your question, because that is going to help the person who matches our clients up with our mentors with the right skill set. If you come and say, I need help marketing, you're not going to go to me because I'm a finance person. But if you say, I need help planning my cash flow for my business, they may send you to me. So be as specific as you can in your request, and that will get you to the right person with the right skill sets. And we can help you out. So any other final questions before we wrap up? All right. It looks like that's everything. I want to thank everybody for joining today. Thank you for your engagement. John, did you see one more?
I think we got them all. If anybody has a question we didn't answer, speak up, please, because we missed it.
It's like there's one about a restaurant mentor. You can just put that in your request.
Yeah, his name happens to be Savas, and you'll get routed to him in all likelihood if he's available.
So with that, we're going to wrap up. I want to just thank everybody for joining today. Thank you for your engagement and your questions. It was very helpful. And again, if there's any other help you need, go to score.org and you can reach out for help, and we'd be glad to do that. And most importantly, good luck with your business, and we wish you the best.